Lieutenant Commander Vexnar of the Galactic Coalition had seen many strange things during his 40 cycles of military service. He had witnessed the birth of stars and the death of worlds. He had fought against enemies that existed in dimensions humans could not even imagine. But nothing in all his years of experience had prepared him for what he was about to witness in Barracks 7 of the Coalition's flagship, the Eternal Vigilance. The ship carried soldiers from 17 different species. Some were massive beings with scales that could deflect plasma fire. Others were creatures of pure energy who communicated through colors. There were insectoid warriors with hive minds and aquatic beings who operated from specialized water tanks. But among all these diverse soldiers, there was one species that confused everyone the most: the humans. Humans had only joined the Coalition 30 standard cycles ago. They were soft. They were small. They had no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities. By all logical standards, they should have been among the weakest species in the known universe, and yet somehow they had become one of the most respected members of the Coalition military. Vexnar still did not fully understand how this was possible. The incident that would change everything began on a routine patrol mission. The Eternal Vigilance had responded to a distress signal from a colony world called Verdant 3. When the rescue teams arrived, they found the colony destroyed. The raiders had come and gone, leaving nothing but ash and silence. Nothing except for 3 small survivors. They were Karathi cubs. The Karathi were large feline beings, standing nearly 3 meters tall when fully grown. They were covered in thick silver fur and possessed claws that could tear through ship hulls. They were also one of the most emotionally sensitive species in the galaxy. The 3 cubs found in the wreckage were barely a cycle old. They had hidden in a food storage unit while their entire colony was slaughtered. Now they sat in the medical bay of the Eternal Vigilance, silent and terrified. The medical officers had tried everything. They offered food, but the cubs would not eat. They offered toys and entertainment screens, but the cubs would not play. They just sat together in a tight ball of silver fur, their large golden eyes staring at nothing. The ship's counselors said they were in severe shock. Without intervention, they might not survive. This was when Specialist Maya Chen entered the picture. Maya was a small human woman, barely 1.5 meters tall. She had dark hair that she kept tied in a simple knot, and tired eyes that suggested she had seen too much death for someone her age. She was assigned to the logistics division, which meant she spent most of her time counting supplies and organizing cargo manifests. She was not a soldier. She was not a counselor. She was, by all official records, completely unremarkable. But Maya had grown up on a farming colony on the Outer Rim. She had raised animals all her life. And when she heard about the 3 orphaned cubs who would not eat or sleep, something in her heart broke. She went to the medical bay that night without permission. The guards tried to stop her, but she simply walked past them with a confidence that made them hesitate. By the time they decided to actually restrain her, she was already inside the quarantine area where the cubs were kept. The cubs looked at her with wide, frightened eyes. Maya sat down on the floor, making herself as small and non-threatening as possible. She did not try to touch them. She did not speak to them. She simply sat there, breathing slowly and steadily, waiting. For 3 hours, nothing happened. The guards watched through the observation window, waiting for the human to give up and leave. But Maya did not move. She sat perfectly still, her breathing calm and even. Slowly, so slowly that no one noticed at first, one of the cubs began to uncurl from the protective ball. The smallest cub, a female with a darker patch of fur over one eye, crept toward Maya. Her movements were hesitant, ready to flee at the slightest sign of danger. Maya continued to sit perfectly still. The cub came closer, closer, and then, with a tiny sound that broke the hearts of everyone watching, the cub climbed into Maya's lap. Maya began to sing. It was a simple song, a lullaby from Earth that mothers had sung to their children for thousands of years. Her voice was not particularly beautiful. She was slightly off-key in places. But there was something in that song, something ancient and powerful, that transcended species and language. The other two cubs uncurled. They crept toward Maya, drawn by the sound of her voice. Within minutes, all three cubs were piled in her lap, their small bodies pressed against her warmth. Maya continued to sing, her hands gently stroking their silver fur. And for the first time since their rescue, the cubs closed their eyes. They slept. The medical officers were amazed. They had tried every technique known to Karathi psychology, but nothing had worked. Yet this unremarkable human woman had calmed the cubs in a matter of hours. When they asked Maya how she had done it, she simply shrugged and said that all scared creatures needed the same thing. They needed to feel safe. The cubs refused to let Maya leave. When she tried to return to her quarters that night, they followed her. When the guards tried to stop them, they became agitated and began to cry in high-pitched wails that echoed through the entire deck. Maya looked at the guards, then at the cubs, and made a decision. She brought them to her quarters in Barracks 7. Barracks 7 was a mixed-species dormitory. It housed soldiers from 5 different species, including humans, Karathi, Veltrix, and 2 others. The barracks operated on a strict schedule. Lights on at 600, lights off at 2200, no exceptions. This schedule had been established because the different species had different sleep cycles, and compromise was necessary for everyone to function. Maya arrived at the barracks with 3 Karathi cubs clinging to her legs. Her bunkmates stared at her in confusion and concern. A massive Karathi warrior named Orcs approached her, his expression unreadable. The cubs were from his species, after all. Orcs looked at the cubs. He looked at Maya. And then, to everyone's surprise, he knelt down and made a gesture of respect. He explained that in Karathi culture, one who cares for orphaned cubs is considered sacred. Maya had taken on a great responsibility, and he would honor that. The other Karathi soldiers in the barracks murmured agreement. But there was a problem. The cubs would not sleep unless Maya slept first. It took them 2 days to figure this out. Every night, Maya would try to put the cubs to bed. She would sing to them, stroke their fur, do everything she had done in the medical bay. But the cubs would not close their eyes. They watched her constantly, their golden gazes fixed on her face. If she moved, they moved. If she stood up, they stood up. They refused to let her out of their sight. On the 3rd night, Maya was exhausted. She had not slept properly since the cubs arrived. Her body ached, and her mind was fuzzy with fatigue. She lay down on her bunk, too tired to even remove her boots. The cubs immediately climbed up beside her, pressing their warm bodies against hers. Within seconds, Maya was asleep. And the moment her breathing changed, the moment her body relaxed into true sleep, all 3 cubs closed their eyes and fell asleep too. The other soldiers in the barracks watched this with fascination. Specialist Torres, Maya's bunkmate, realized what was happening. The cubs had been traumatized. They had watched their protectors die. Now they had found a new protector in Maya, and they could not allow themselves to be vulnerable unless she was vulnerable first. If Maya was awake, she could protect them. If Maya was asleep, it meant the world was safe enough for sleep. This created a problem. Maya's natural sleep schedule did not align with the barracks' lights-out time. She was a night owl by nature, often staying awake reading or working on personal projects until well past midnight. But now, with 3 cubs who would only sleep when she slept, her personal habits were affecting the entire barracks. The cubs, it turned out, were not quiet sleepers. When Maya stayed awake past her usual bedtime, the cubs became restless. They whimpered and paced and made sounds that kept everyone else awake. But the moment Maya decided to sleep, the cubs fell silent. After a week of this, the barracks developed an unspoken rule. When Maya yawned, everyone started preparing for bed. When Maya stretched and rubbed her eyes, conversations ended and entertainment screens were turned off. When Maya finally lay down and closed her eyes, the entire barracks fell silent. Commander Vexnar first heard about this when he reviewed the barracks efficiency reports. He noticed that Barracks 7 had suddenly achieved perfect sleeping compliance. Every soldier was asleep by the exact same time every night, and everyone woke up at the exact same time every morning. This was unusual. Most mixed-species barracks had constant conflicts over sleeping schedules. He went to investigate personally. What he found amazed him. The entire barracks had reorganized itself around one small human woman and 3 traumatized cubs. Maya's bunk had been moved to a central location where the cubs could see the door at all times. The other soldiers had arranged their sleeping areas in a protective circle around her. The lights were now controlled by a sensor that monitored Maya's biorhythms. When her body showed signs of approaching sleep, the lights automatically began to dim. Vexnar watched as Maya returned from her shift. She was tired as usual. The cubs ran to greet her, their tails wagging with joy. She picked up the smallest one and held it against her chest while the other 2 pressed against her legs. Around her, the other soldiers finished their activities and began preparing for rest. No one had given orders. No one had spoken. They simply watched Maya, waiting for her signal. Maya sat on her bunk. She yawned. The lights dimmed by 20%. She pulled off her boots. The soldiers in the barracks pulled off their own boots. She lay down, the cubs arranging themselves around her. She closed her eyes. The lights went out completely. 47 soldiers from 5 different species lay down and closed their eyes. Within minutes, the entire barracks was asleep. Vexnar stood in the doorway, completely speechless. He had served in the coalition military for 4 decades. He had commanded thousands of soldiers. He had studied leadership and discipline and military psychology. And yet here was a logistics specialist with no command authority who had achieved perfect synchronization across an entire barracks simply because 3 orphaned cubs loved her. He left without disturbing them. The next day, he submitted a report to Coalition Command. He recommended that Specialist Maya Chen be reassigned to a permanent position in mixed species integration. He noted that humans seemed to possess an unusual ability to create emotional bonds across species boundaries. He suggested that this ability should be studied and utilized. The cubs grew quickly, as Karathi young do. Within 6 months, they were nearly Maya's height. Within a year, they towered over her, but their behavior never changed. Every night, they would curl around Maya's bunk and wait for her to fall asleep. Only then would they allow themselves to rest. The tradition continued even after the cubs were old enough to be transferred to their own quarters. They refused to go. They stayed in Barracks 7, officially assigned as Maya's protective detail. The other soldiers in the barracks considered this entirely appropriate. Other soldiers began to request transfers to Barracks 7. Word had spread throughout the ship that there was a place where soldiers slept soundly, where nightmares were rare, where even the most battle-scarred veterans could find peace. The waiting list grew long. Maya was embarrassed by all the attention, but she could not stop it. The barracks became known throughout the fleet as the place where a human woman told an entire deck when to sleep. New officers were told about it during orientation. It became a legend, then a tradition. And whenever someone asked Maya how she had accomplished such a thing, she would smile and say that she had done nothing at all. She had just shown 3 frightened children that they were safe. The cubs, now fully grown warriors in their own right, would always add their own correction to this story. They would explain that Maya had done much more than that. She had shown them that love was stronger than fear, and that was a lesson worth following, even if it meant sleeping when a small human woman told them to. Commander Vexnar eventually retired from active service. In his final report to Coalition Command, He wrote one paragraph that would be quoted for generations to come. He wrote that humans were dangerous, not because of their weapons or their technology, but because of their impossible ability to make other beings love them. In a universe of warriors and conquerors, he concluded, the humans had found a different path to power. They made themselves essential not by being strong, but by being kind. The lights in Barracks 7 still dim the moment Maya closes her eyes. And 47 soldiers still follow her into sleep, trusting that she will keep them safe until morning.